Welcome to Midlife Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, Jennifer Lownik. Jennifer provides safety education and training for women and girls, and I'm delighted to have her here to share the important message that is part of her programming and services. So welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thanks. Pleasure to be here.
Jennifer, you frequently traveled for business in your previous life, and I know you're still very active, and your dad's been in the safety business for many years.
Right.
What experiences did you have that encouraged you to get involved with this whole enterprise of sharing news with women and girls about ways to be safer?
Right. And a lot of people ask that question. I in addition to the work that I do for IMSAFE, I still currently run an event planning company. And many years ago, traveled quite a bit. Don't travel as much now. But over the course of all of that travel, really came upon lots of experiences. Sometimes it's something simple, and this may have happened to you before, checking into a hotel room and you've got an electronic key and being, tucked into bed and thinking that you're safe in your hotel room, and all of a sudden somebody comes into that room. And it happens quite frequently, but it's an electronic key and it's just a simple mishap at a front desk that allows somebody access. And, thankfully in my case, it wasn't a situation. I think that person that came into the room was as mortified as I was and ducked out. But you start to have those kinds of experiences and things like that. Experiences with hotel staff that you're reading about in papers and things like that that are not real hotel staff, but they're posing as hotel employees. So situations like that, you start to come across some of those things and really start to become aware of some of the situations that you can get yourself into pretty easily. Specifically being a single female traveler and just really being kind of aware of what could happen around you.
And I know we had chatted about there's also experiences where women are, say, getting on a plane, making sure not looking like they can't manage their own luggage, not appearing vulnerable.
Right. So, and one of the things we talk about to women specifically is just how you carry yourself, your appearance, and if you're traveling and you're showing up at the airport in really high heels and maybe a very narrow skirt, and there is some sort of an emergency, can you really get yourself out of that kind of a situation, quickly? Maybe that's not the best kind of a choice on a travel day. But just other simple little tips like, we say pack a larger suitcase than you really need. And even if half of it's empty, the impression of hoisting a big, heavy-looking suitcase into an overhead compartment shows that you've got the strength. A lot of things, when people are looking for opportunities, and I really mean that as the term that we use at IMSAFE is a predator, or somebody looking for an opportunity. So when somebody's looking for somebody as a target, they're looking for somebody who's weak, maybe somebody who's distracted. That can be a perceived weakness. Maybe it's somebody who isn't dressed appropriately, or some of those kinds of things. Something that's distracting them and providing an opportunity for that person to maybe get a quick grab of a purse or a bag, something like that. So looking at some of those things, making sure that you're carrying yourself confidently, that you're you're dressed appropriately, doing some of those things, that you're not distracted, you're really paying attention to what's going on around you.
So really, in essence, having a sense about how you're going to be perceived while you're traveling, and taking extra caution that you might not have to be as concerned about if you were a burly guy, right?
Right. And I do it all the time, and you've probably seen it too. I'm at a shopping mall, and you see somebody that's walking out and they're very matter of fact and they're looking around and they're checking their whereabouts, they're checking the parking lot, and then compare that to somebody who leaves and they've got, their phone up this way and they've got bags on both arms and they've got a kid that they're towing along. That person isn't in tune with what's going on around them. So that really is, if you're looking at a parallel of those two people walking through a parking lot or through a mall or, wherever it is, it could be traveling, it could be a hotel. You look at those two opportunities, and if somebody's looking to take advantage of that kind of situation, they are most definitely going to go for somebody who is distracted.
So you're a certified self-defense instructor.
I am.
And you're a personal security specialist.
Yes.
So why don't you talk a little bit about what that means?
It's basically something that just sort of evolved over the years. My father was always in the safety and security industry, if you will. And it was something really that just sort of evolved over time. We have extensive training in personal safety and hands-on self-defense. We actually teach a class called Girls Strike Back. It's a hands-on self-defense class that is 4 different levels, and it teaches women very effectively how to use their legs to take advantage of a situation. So if I'm up against a male attacker, and typically men will fight with an upper body strength, their arms, and a typical female next to average male, this is not my strongest suit. But we teach women to use their legs because it's your strongest muscle basically in your body, and really levels the playing field pretty quickly. So we teach Girls Strike Back to women starting ages 12 and up. And it really is how to avoid a sexual assault on your body, but also just a casual encounter. So when we teach Girls Strike Back, what we do is we say that we teach it in reverse. We teach worst case scenario first. Worst case scenario is a physical assault on your body. How do I get somebody to stop? And then we back that up, and actually the last class that we teach is just a casual encounter. I'm on public transportation, somebody's getting a little bit aggressive, and I'm not going to take them down to the ground, but I'm going to let them know, you know what, I've got some boundaries here, and we need to step off. So it's kind of a stepped approach, but we teach, so that to me is what personal safety and self-defense means, is giving women an opportunity to not live in fear, a way to defend themselves and get out of a situation, a skill set that they can use no matter where they are, and just not having to worry about, not going out and looking for bad situations, but not having to worry about what they're doing.
And I would think social media could be a real barrier. The whole distracted driving, distracted walking, people getting hit by cars.
Right.
I mean, that's not even an intentional form of aggression, but I would think that would be a phenomenon that particularly young girls who are likely to absorb that whole constantly plugged in.
Right, constantly plugged
pattern.
in. Number one, distracted, which I already talked about, so somebody's distracted that way. But it's also bullying. So you think about the whole aspect of social media and people using that to bully people. Bullying is another hot topic when you're talking about personal safety and how to de-escalate situations. All of that, it's very heavily tied into social media. And then you take it one step further. So if somebody is a distracted driver and ends up in a collision, and now you've got, sometimes it's road rage, or you find yourself in a situation, where there has been an accident and somebody gets out of the car and they're screaming and they're all fired up. One of the other things we teach, we don't want people to be in these bad situations. Right. We want people to de-escalate. So we do teach, how do you get somebody who's really angry to calm down? And it's simple things like, don't say calm down. Because as soon as you say to somebody, calm down, and you've got your hands up, they say, I am calm, or you don't understand what I've just been through. So there are other techniques that we teach to get people to say, okay, well, let me understand where you're coming from here, and, help me understand, and just certain key terms, and even body language, just doing this tells somebody to calm down. But saying the words calm down can actually escalate a situation at times.
Now, what about parents who have had their girls take some form of self-defense with the idea that they want them to have that skill set? Does that kind of automatically translate to them being safer if they come under assault, or does their mental sense of preparedness
I think
need to be primed?
What we talk about, we call it an experience library at I Am Safe. And I don't say that our program is the best program or the only program to take. It's one of many options. And I think really your best choice is to take multiple training and multiple, fill your experience library with as much as you can. And what an experience library is you walk into a regular library and they're bookshelves, right? And you've got fiction, nonfiction, you've got all these different categories, and you can find information very easily. Your brain is what we call your experience library. So if I have a situation, so say I had that experience with the hotel. Somebody walked into my room and I said, "Wow, what would I have done if that person?"
It was intentional,
right? Exactly. So that's an experience. So your mind starts saying, "Well, gosh, what could I have done?" Well, I could carry a wooden door wedge and put that under my side of the door so that doesn't happen again. Okay, I've got that experience, and now I've got a plan to come back. So what we say is, if you start to, you have real experiences, but then you can also have imagined experiences. So if I'm walking down the street and I say, what would, and it's not about being paranoid, but what would I do if this person, went to grab my purse? Or what would I do if this happened? Or what would I do if there was an earthquake and I'm traveling and there's an earthquake in this hotel? How would I, and you start to go through with your brain and thinking of strategies and things that you can do to get yourself out of a situation. So when you're talking about, girls being trained and taking self-defense and all those things, every experience for them, either reading information about personal safety, taking a self-defense class, any of those things is going to start to build their experience library. And eventually it becomes second nature, so that if, God forbid, you are ever in that kind of a situation, your brain has something to pull from. You're not sitting there with adrenaline surging through you saying, I never imagined this would happen, now what?
Right.
You've got, I've got something to start from. I've got a foundation, if you will, in safety that I can pull from and build from.
And I know you also talk about the cultural trends that can put women in danger. And let's talk a little bit about some things women can do. I know I've looked at some of your materials. You have a new book out. We're going to talk about that.
Right.
That's very instructional, informative. The idea of having a built-in warning system, which I think you're talking about, establishing routines, maybe keeping a journal. Aren't those some techniques that you've talked about in terms of things people can do to, I would think of it almost like consciousness raising, like keep things more available in that experience library?
And top of mind, exactly.
Top of mind.
And, you mentioned cultural, too, and a lot of times, too, is just educating yourself. So that comes into the experience library, but also, if you're traveling to a foreign country, take some time to do some research. How can I blend in rather than stand out? How can I not look like a traveler? Even if it's someplace you've never been before, is there a way that I can blend in and look like, okay, I fit the part here, and rather than,
walking around, wow.
Exactly. And not to offend somebody, right?
No.
I mean, it could be something as simple as clothing. If you're wearing the wrong clothing somewhere, you can be very offensive, and that can start a problem. So just taking the time to educate yourself, like we said, experience library, having some things to pull from. I'm going to a new place. Let me look into the transportation options. What am I going to be greeted with when I get to the airport? How do I get myself through this so that I'm not standing there, with a map and looking very vulnerable and things like that.
At least even if you're identifiable as a traveler, you look like a savvy traveler, I would think, right? Not the easiest target.
Right.
Someone who's...
Even something as simple as protecting your passport cover. A U.S. passport is worth a lot of money. Protecting that. Not everybody needs to know that you're a U.S. traveler if you're traveling abroad. So any of those kinds of things, like you were saying, keep a journal, and maybe it's just jotting down some of those key things that you want to remember or keep top of mind when you're traveling.
It looks like you and your dad, Dennis Golden, who's in our studio today, so that's great, have collected a lot of this information into a book called What to Know, Do, and Say to Be Safe.
Correct.
And you have plans for using proceeds of that book towards some charitable organizations, and we can talk about the particular form that you've established. But first, I'd like to just ask you, tell us about the squirrel in the backyard that you talk about in that book.
In the book. And the book really, just a quick little background, is it really was a needed piece. People coming to us saying, where do you get this information? Right. So, as you said, it was a gathering of a lot of our own experiences, but also, other pieces of information to pull together. But the funny story that we share in there is many women, and men too, but many people will come to us and say, well, we'll say, you've got a 6-foot tall man, 250 pounds. Do you think you could survive an encounter with that person? And any size women, it doesn't matter, large, small, whatever. Do you think you could survive that encounter? And most women will say, no, there's no way. And then we say, well, all right, let's think about this. So you've got the squirrel in the backyard, and it's a little, 1 pound, 2 pound rodent in a sense. And if you take that 6-foot, 250-pound male and you ask him to grab onto that squirrel and hold on to it, who do you think's going to win the fight? And they kind of look and they say, oh, the squirrel. And the point being, the squirrel's going to win because that squirrel is not going to give up. That thing is going to bite. It's going to scratch. It's going to go nuts, basically, trying to get out of the grasp of that attacker. So the point really with that story is to show women, anybody really, if you're under an attack or if you feel like your life is being threatened, you're in that kind of a situation, fight like a squirrel. You have to fight with every ounce of your soul. You have to, constantly change your tactics and do whatever, but whatever you do, you don't give up. And it is possible. If it's possible for that little tiny gray thing that runs around your backyard to win that, then anybody really can get out of that kind
and
of
if you
encounter.
couple that with some training,
right,
as you've already mentioned, for
Absolutely.
example, use your legs versus your arms, maybe get on the ground, kick up,
right,
different techniques
right.
that I know you offer.
Yep.
With the mindset, I'm going to fight like a squirrel. Now you've got kind of a double loop
Exactly.
thing there going on that's really going to help reinforce
Exactly.
the best response possible
Definitely.
in that situation.
And that's really our goal, is just to say, take all these little skill sets and a mindset, really. Somebody has to be prepared to do that. But all the things you can do to increase your odds.
And to plan and manage uncertainty, that seemed to be some of the wording I was picking up with what the main message is to
Right.
really, again, be very thoughtful and as you say, anticipate, imagine, and think about strategies. And I'm sure a lot of your workshops really focus on putting people in those situations and then having them practice
Absolutely.
and witness others. And
Right. It's some of the most powerful moments of our hands-on training classes. And we'll go through all the exercises. And we have women work with women, and it's a women-only training. But putting them in those scenarios. And then at the end of the training, we do have a male instructor that comes in a full padded suit. And I usually joke with everyone in the room. It's about that time that everyone's eyes hit the ground and nobody wants to look at me because they know they're going to be called on. But that's a moment where it's uncomfortable and that adrenaline does kick in. But after they go through it, and we really encourage everybody to try that, because that's really where it comes together. And realizing the force that it takes to actually, go through with some of these moves and to move a male body that is a 6-foot body and a 200-pound body. And most women will come out of that exercise and they say, oh my goodness, I had no idea the level of strength and focus and determination. Because you'll see some people go through and they try and it may not work, and then you say no, you have to get angry, like you need to
be the squirrel.
Yes,
right?
you have to exactly. And we say that, and we have a lot of good fun, and everyone's cheering everybody on. But it's not until they shift into that mindset of, okay, all right, this is it, and this guy's not going to stop until I do it. That's really the point in the training where they say, wow, it's you see an epiphany, you see a
possible.
breakthrough.
Maybe really surprise themselves.
Right.
I would think.
Right. They really do.
So let's talk about this nonprofit institute that you've created, and I know you also have a online forum where women can register and share stories.
Right.
Are they one and the same? The forum and the nonprofit institute?
They work together hand in hand. So I created the I Am Safe Institute. Is really it's a 501c3. It's a nonprofit, and it's really with the focus of helping women who are victims of domestic violence, assault, that don't have the means to get the training that we provide. So it's really giving them an opportunity to get their confidence back. We've done tremendous number of training for women in that situation who, coming out of prison or just life scenarios, and come to us and really are kind of a shell of a person. I mean, you've had such a personal thing happen to you and somewhat shattered, and to go through this training, it really, for us, it feels like a gift to give them this training complimentary. But to have them come to us and say, I haven't had this confidence, I haven't had this feeling since this situation occurred with them, and really seeing a transformation as they go through the class. So the focus of the Institute is really to do that, to take women that have been in an unfortunate situation and to say, you don't need to live in fear. Here are the tools that will help you. Here's how you get your confidence back. Here's what you can do. And typically that's when, they start saying, who you need to talk to is this friend and this person. And all of a sudden there's this network of people that they know can benefit from it. And then the forum came out of that as well. So in both our regular classes and as part of our nonprofit, there hasn't been a class that I've taught where we haven't had somebody who's been affected in some way. And it could be something as simple, and not simple, but an office bully. It could be workplace violence. It could be, a high school girl who had a situation with a relationship. It can be somebody who was married to somebody for, 15 years and lived with us on a daily basis. But all these women would come to us and they'd say, I don't really want to talk about all these things, and I appreciate, that you've given us the training, but is there any way that I can connect with other women who've walked in my shoes, who've been in this kind of a situation? So we created the forum as an online forum, and it's totally secure. We screen everybody who comes into it to make sure it's legitimate. And it's women only. But it's an area where they can go in and it's categorized. They can go into different categories and, just their life experiences. But it's a way for them to connect with other people, really share what they've been through, but also support each other. There are women who've been through amazing scenarios and have come out the other side and go on to inspire so many people. We've got authors in there. We've got amazing women in there. So it really is, it's beneficial, I think, to women no matter what phase they're in and stage of surviving.
So my understanding is with your book, What to Know, Do, and Say to Be Safe, you're planning on providing proceeds from the book to provide it to people who most need it, right?
Exactly. So the proceeds from the book will we're looking for sponsors basically to provide the book complimentary. And that's another way. We're working through our institute, the I Am Safe Institute. We can get complimentary copies to these women. And there's a need. I mean, there's definitely a need. As I mentioned, we're constantly asked for, where do I go to get these resources? So would love to, if we can, our goal is actually to donate 250 copies of the book complimentary.
Nice.
So
I'm thinking maybe
like
a chamber or any community organization, right, that might have it fit with other initiatives that they have or something that they really want to be a part of.
Absolutely. Even hospitals. I mean, we work closely with hospitals. We work any number of organizations. But somebody that's, obviously has a passion for it like we do and a link to helping other women.
Wonderful. Now let's talk about you a little bit. One question I have, I'm really interested in your perspective. Do you think women in management have any patterns or typical behaviors that either encourage workplace violence being more put on the table and openly talked about? I mean, do you see any gender differences?
I really don't.
Okay.
Workplace violence it's everywhere,
right,
unfortunately. I do think there's more awareness on the topic right now. I do feel like it is top of mind, and unfortunately sometimes it's because of what's happened and been obviously made public by the media. I do feel like men and women equally can turn their heads to it too. So what I do say with any of the workplace violence situations is, many times there's a common thread through all of these, right? So you have a situation, you hear about this in the news, you hear about a completely separate situation, this in the news, and so on. And they start to go back and interview people. And they ask them, did you know this person was such a problem? And in the beginning, it seems like, no, nobody knew that this was coming.
Yeah.
I can't believe it happened in a nice town, all these things. And what you start to find a little bit after all of this investigation starts is that they did know. And sometimes it's as simple as, well, that person was always angry, or that manager was always a really strict manager and had a reputation for being a very tough person. And then you come to find out that that person was really bullying people or, just would fly off the handle at certain things. So with workplace violence, I think, as I said, I think people are becoming more aware, but both men and women, need to listen to that intuition. That's another thing that we talk about too, and it certainly applies in the workplace violence, is if you're getting that sense and if you're feeling like, something's off, something's not quite right, I'm not so sure. Trust it and listen to it and act on it.
Because from my perspective, organizations have cultures, and this is the way we do things here. And if the way we do things here is to not talk about those things, but your instinct is telling you something different, not the easiest thing, but I would think the type of information, services, and training that you offer would probably help people really pull their thoughts together and feel more confident about being maybe the first person to come out and start talking about
absolutely. We do workplace violence training that actually walks them through, what are the signs to look for, and how do you do you start documenting some of these things? How do you de-escalate a situation? You know, a lot of times too, we're sort of programmed to be polite and nice and not to ruffle feathers. And if somebody has a bad day, to just kind of turn the other cheek. And sometimes, you know, that's not the best approach. And especially if you're dealing with something like that within a workplace, you know, what can you do to take care of that situation and ultimately keep all the rest of the employees safe? So.
You've done such terrific work already in your life. And as you look back at like your 25-year-old self, would you have been surprised at what you're doing now? Or like what advice would you have given yourself back then?
I think about that, and I've been asked that before. And it's funny, you know, I am happy with where I am. I'm very proud of the accomplishments I've had. But if I had to look back at my 25-year-old self, I don't know that I would change anything. Nice. I mean, I think your parents, and I'm a parent myself too, you're constantly trying to shelter and obviously educate and empower your children. But sometimes you do have to have some life experiences. Sometimes you do have to have some things that don't go maybe the way that you planned. You've got to, you know, change that plan a little bit to get to where you are. So I don't think that I would look at that and say, oh, I would do that differently or change something. I think all of those have shaped, you know, who I am today, certainly. And I look at, you know, my children kind of, you know, coming up in the same sort of thing. And I think they're going to have, you know, similar life experiences too. I think you have to kind of go through the twists and the turns and navigate through that to learn some of those things.
And I know I've seen, I believe it's your daughter, right, on some of the training that you've had videos and on your website,
exactly,
et cetera. So
exactly.
What a wonderful opportunity for her and her friends and anyone that knows you. I mean, just on a very personal level.
Right.
You know, one child at a time to help them by the time they get to be 25 and by the time they're moving along and traveling and navigating the world.
Exactly. And I feel very strongly about that too. Just at that age, yes, we were taught at that age to play nicely in the sandbox and share and all those things, but it's okay for a child to say no. It's okay for a child to use their voice. It's okay for a child to fight back. And giving them the tools, even at a young age. I mean, we teach little kids how can you avoid a kidnapping? How can you avoid being kidnapped? How do you keep your body safe? And all of those things, just even talking about stranger awareness and things like that. That training starting at that age starts building their little experience library.
I would think that would be the richest experience base, right? Is where you really, it just becomes part of who you are and you just adding to it all the time and you don't have to develop the mindset. It's forming
there.
as you're growing.
And I do that. I mean, it's obviously age appropriate.
Right.
But I do that with my kids when we're out shopping. Okay, so if we were in a parking lot and somebody approached, you know, mommy in the car, what would we do? So the kids have a plan. And it's just like anybody, you know, in a workplace might have fire alarms. You know, what do we do for that? Or at home, you have a fire evacuation plan that they talk about with the kids in school and things like that. It's the same kind of a plan. Just, you know, if you're in this situation, what would you do? You know, my daughter is in swim lessons, and if mom wasn't there to pick you up, what would you do? What would your plan be? These are the things you could do. And getting kids to think about those things, I think, is very critical, is that they start to realize, okay, you know, I have a plan. There are ways that I can keep myself safe.
What a perfect message to end on. Thank you so much for being part of the show, Midlife Matters.
Georgian.
And just, I applaud everything that you and your dad are doing. I think it's so needed, certainly from my experience being in human resources and having been involved in some of the training. And I'd like to close with a quote that I thought seemed very appropriate. And this is from Alice Walker, who said, "The most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any."
Right.
And I think she really captured the whole idea of the mindset of being able to have that planful way to manage uncertainties of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So thank you, Jennifer, and good luck with all your work and your book,
much.
and I hope you get people to help you distribute all your good information.
Thank you.
And this has been Midlife Matters. Thanks so much for joining us.